Casual Magic has been sponsored by Quiver, maker of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine deck holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their website for 10% off your order. We're also sponsored by Architect, the premier site for hosting your decks on the internet. I love them and they love me, and it seems like a good reason for you to use them. You can also support Casual Magic directly by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/ShivanB. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Architect and Quiver. You can also support me directly on my Patreon at patreon.com/ShivanB. Today I'm very, very excited to have one of the most, decorated or celebrated players of the recent era on my show, Simon Nielsen, who's hit a remarkable 4 top 8s in a row, which is just kind of insane. It's in an era where we're not Kai Buddha, that seems just completely unthinkable. And I'm super excited to talk to you because I really enjoy watching you play. I've been a fan of yours for a while now, and it's really cool to just see somebody who's enjoying themselves so much when they're playing. Thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's been definitely cool to come on here and talk a bit about, what makes me so happy about the game.
Exactly. I think for too often we are inundated with cynicism. People are just really on Twitter and on social media and everything. People just get real salty and bored all the time. Magic is giving us too many cards, but they're the wrong kind of cards, and all my favorite formats suck, but all the other formats are broken. I'm like, guys, we're playing the game because we like this game. If we don't, let's find something else to do. And so when I see somebody who's especially in a pro tour where you guys are always so serious and so focused all the time, to see somebody who's just enjoying themselves so much is wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's definitely also kind of the vibe that I want to, radiate.
Yeah. Yesterday I was talking to Anthony Lee, who is also on Handshake with you. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me that you're one of his favorite players to just play against. And I'm like, that's a great compliment, man. That's
yeah. I definitely appreciate that. Actually, it's funny that Javier says the opposite, Javier Dominguez, because he finds me intimidating to play against and scary, which is I don't know how it happens, but he's always nervous.
That's so weird because you guys are some of the best players there are in the world. What is he intimidated? Now, I mean, I've been intimidated before because I sat down and I played a random casual game against David Ochoa back when he was still insanely good. And this kid just tore me to pieces. We were playing literally just Innistrad. We would crack an Innistrad pack and then add 15 random basics.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. So really casual, yeah.
Yeah, utterly we've got 5 minutes to kill tier casual.
Yeah.
And he destroyed me, and I'm like, oh, even playing with garbage, you're still just that was the most intimidating I've ever felt playing against a player. But that's because I've never sat down with I don't know, you or LSV or anybody. So do you get intimidated when you're sitting down at pro tours like that?
I used to, but not as much anymore. I think I think a lot of first of all, I've just been around the block enough. I've played against really good players. I team with good players, right? So I'm just used to playing against people who are great. I think Seth Manfield actually gets under my skin a little bit. There was we met at at the last World Championship actually in the finals of a draft pot, and I tend to use a bit of my theater background when I play as well, and I'll do a little bit of a I'll because I'm very expressive when I play, but it's sometimes I just do it to make you think something, and he immediately said I don't think I can trust these sounds you're making. And then just played around my car, and I was like, oh no, what have I done? Or he didn't play into the thing I was trying to bluff that I had. So yeah.
Oh man, he saw you coming a mile away. That's funny. Actually, that's a good segue. I would love to know your background. So you're from Denmark?
Yes.
How did you find Magic?
So one of my friends in high school, she had like some cards just in her room, and I was just like visiting for other reasons. And at that time, I was like already like looking into other card games, and I thought, oh right, Magic, like that would be another fun game to learn the rules of, and maybe I can play with her sometime. And so I just like got the little booklet with the rules that you get in the intro decks. Brought that with me home. I remember like my dad came in and he was like, "Oh, is that another game?" I'm like, "Dad, I'm just gonna learn the rules. I'm not gonna actually play it." And then and then that is just not how Magic works, because I was like immediately like sucked in. And especially like a couple months later when
Do you know what set that was or what time period?
This was around Mirrodin Besieged, Scars of Mirrodin, like that time. And so yeah, a good like 13 years ago. And I like came upon some coverage of Pro Tour Paris 2011. That that's the first time I like watched any like competitive like any sort of like card gaming, right? And I just remember being like amazed at what like I didn't fully understand what was going on. I was really like curious and hungry to try and understand what was going on with these decks, and like why this card Stoneforge Mystic was so good, and like and I just like remember telling myself that, wow, I want to like do that one day. Like I want to play in these like like coverage matches on a Pro Tour. And so that's like that's what I started working towards at that point.
That's I came back to Magic right around that time too, because I'd started playing many 30 years ago or whatever. And when I came back around like the beginning of Innistrad, end of Scars Block and stuff, and I started getting into Pro Tour coverage too, and I was like, wow, I love watching this, but I definitely did not think that I was capable of, oh man, I would love to try that, because I was like, oh, they're going to just kick my ass around the corner. I'm just and then I discovered Commander immediately after, and I was like, I'll stick to this. But so did you play a lot of games before then? Because like you're saying your dad was like asking you about your card games before. Did you grow up a gamer? I mean,
I definitely have had an interest in card games, like but not, I wouldn't say like that active as like like I just like played Yu-Gi-Oh casually, or like I would play Pokemon with my brother and stuff like that, but not like I didn't really obsess over any. Oh, actually, no, I played a lot of Warhammer actually at that time with my dad, who was still like running the Warhammer club in our hometown. So so like that was like that was the type of like game that I was like invested in at the time.
Did you show him the Warhammer Magic set that came out?
Yeah, actually I did. Yeah, it's not it did not impress him.
But man, so what was the scene like in Denmark though, when you like, did you start trying to play pro immediately, or not pro, but like competitively going to FNMs and things like that immediately, or did you ramp into that?
I slowly ramped into it. Like it was like very much just like the usual steps you would take. Where I just like found out that there was like a like an after school extracurricular activity that was Magic, a Magic club.
Really?
Which is awesome. Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
And so I joined that. And then there was one guy there who was like, "Oh, I go to FNM in this other town. Like, you should try. You should come." And then like we would like brew up our decks, and on the train there, we'd like think about what we would do with the prize money. And we obviously didn't win any prize money. And I remember walking into that like store, and this was like Fnatic in Roskilde, which is like has been such a good like cultivating spot for competitive players, because like I would walk into that room and I was like, whoa, I like recognize two of these people from coverage.
That's amazing.
Like, yeah. And we would have like our Friday night Magics would have top 8s. So you would play out the quarterfinal. Yes, every Friday we would like battle until like 1 a.m. so we could like get
awesome.
An actual winner. And it was like, there was like money on the line. And so like I think that was really good for me. And I met, like at that store, I met this kid, Martin Müller, who is like probably the best Danish player ever. And
man, he's so good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He doesn't play anymore, but like at that time, like he would just play so much online, and I would like be part of like those Skype calls, and we'd like play together, and I would like watch him improve. Like he would start going to tournaments, like I'll also go to tournaments, and then I would like try and drag him to like Grand Prix as like more friends started to go there, and so it was just like all about ramping up the levels until we get to like at some point he qualified for the Pro Tour. Won a PDQ, and I was like, man, I really want to do that too now. And then I won a World Magic Cup qualifier to go to the World Magic Cup with him when he was the captain. And that was in 2014 when Denmark won the World Magic Cup. And so that was like the moment where everything kind of kickstarted.
That's amazing. That was like right around the peak of. I mean, that was the start of Martin Mueller's real like kind of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was his first like great finish.
Because like I remember watching him at like Pro Tours later on when he did a lot of modern stuff. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was that like going to Worlds, man? Or going to the World Magic Cup representing your country?
Very exciting. I think the World Magic Cup is like the best type of tournament there's ever been. When you're a small country, there is so much pride in getting to represent like what you do on the big stage, and I can understand that like there's a lot of Americans who like don't like view it that highly because it's like. I mean, there's like America is so much, right? It means so many different things. And we even like have, right now a lot of like American players not even representing their flag, for instance. Like there's like just not that like
there's
that
so
relation
many of us.
to your own nation and like what it means to play Magic in. But in like Denmark or in like Uruguay or like these countries that are like we don't even think about them very much, but
like Costa Rica and the Philippines and things.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That,
but they have like thriving scenes, and like they definitely like it's the sort of thing where like they probably have players who like are really good or could get really good if they were like play somewhere else geographically, but like because there's just like not that many tournament options, it's like really tough. And so having like this spot where it could be like no, like Uruguay is just as much represented as the United States. That's huge. That's really good. And like I mentioned that name because that's like a country that has done pretty well at the World Magic Cup. Greece is another example that has like gone to the finals and won one of these World Magic Cups, right? And it's not we don't think about like all these great players from Greece. I mean, there's definitely like, some that could spring to mind. Socrates Rosakea is like probably the best one right now. And like some of the like online players, but it's like really tough to when it's like it's very expensive to go to tournaments. When you live like somewhere
far, like if you're about like the Thai players.
Like I also think a lot about South Africa. Like that's a community where it's like it's just they have a vibrant Magic community, but it's really hard to like break through or get anywhere because you're just like at the opposite end of the world from everything else.
Exactly. I mean, I would say, like when I was talking to Anthony yesterday, I was like, all these Southeast Asian countries that have thriving Magic scenes like Thailand and Singapore and Philippines and whatever, and imagining trying to go from like, I don't know, Bangkok to Minnesota to play in a Pro Tour is just like prohibitively expensive. And here in America, we're spoiled because we have Command Fest every weekend. We have like 3 Pro Tours. We have all this, and the rest of the world gets so little. And like when I think of like those guys who are playing Magic in Korea, for instance, and where they've stopped supporting the language in paper, but there's still a scene of like hardcore pro players who come from Korea. How hard must that be? Like suddenly the cards aren't even in your language anymore. And it's like, oh damn. Okay, well, how much do you want to play Magic, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's tough. I definitely wish there was like more global support. I'm like pretty fortunate that like Denmark is like kind of in a sweet spot for that because it's like there's like there would be a Grand Prix like somewhere in Europe like every month at least.
Yeah.
That would be like you could sometimes just go by car, or it would be like at most a 3-hour flight. That's like the advantage of living in Europe. Is like everything is really like close.
Yeah, I mean Europe is a lot like the States in the sense of like everything is kind of close by and clustered, so you can get to like it wouldn't be too hard for you to get to Paris for an event if you needed to. I mean,
no, very easy and cheap. Yeah. Like I think it's actually like way better than in the US, where like if you need to go from the West Coast to the East Coast, that's actually like
it's almost cheaper for me to go to Europe.
Both in time and money.
Yeah, seriously. And plus, like, you guys all speak English in Denmark. You learn it very early on. Yes. So getting cards is not, like, difficult.
I would not want Danish cards. They would be so cringe.
That would be awesome. I speak Old English. I mean, rather not speak, but I'm a linguistic scholar of, like, Old Nordic and Germanic languages. So Danish cards would be fun for me as an academic exercise, but
interesting.
I would not want
that's fine. I didn't know that. I'm also, like, studying linguistics right now. So that's...
I speak... At my peak, I spoke 15 languages.
Yeah, nice.
I'm down to like 4 now because I don't really practice. But it's
because obviously they like rust away.
If you don't use it, you lose it, and it turns out. But like you guys have Germany right there. So you try to did you get German cards growing up, or did you guys get English cards?
We just had English cards, yeah. So there's like not that many Danes who know German well enough to read that. So yeah, but the English is like no issue. It's also like like a lot of the other like big European countries, they like dub their movies in their own language, and we just like the Denmark's just not big enough for that. So like whenever we would watch a movie, it would be in English with Danish subtitles. So we would just listen to English from like very. I remember like watching movies with my parents where they would like read the subtitles aloud to me because I wasn't like old enough to read myself, but I still got to like hear English, right?
Sure.
From like age 5 or whatever. So So yeah, I think that's like I think like that's also like pretty fortunate. I think in like being small enough that it's like much easier to be global.
Yeah, that is definitely true, and like Denmark is right there in the nexus of a lot of different places. Man, playing at the Danish World Cup as your first big event must be wild. Or like not the Danish, like the Magic World Cup.
Yeah, the Magic World Cup. Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely also like some nerves back then in like representing my country. But I think I put in like so much work for that tournament. I remember, and I wasn't particularly good. Like all 3 of my teammates were like significantly better than me, and so I just like tried to make up for it with hard work. And at the very end, like it helped a lot that it was a team process where they could tell me what to do so that I didn't, screw up.
That is very helpful. Like, and being able to have like really good players just being like, no, don't draft them. But yeah, I remember because like the first big event I ever went to was the World Magic Cup / Pro Tour in 2011 in San Francisco because it was close to where I lived. And so I go there, I'm on a Wednesday and I'm just hanging out. And when you're at a Wednesday at a big Pro Tour in those days, the only people who are there are like the team captains of the teams of like the various worlds who are like not in an event right now. So I was just jumping into a draft and I'm sitting down and one of them, like, I'm sitting with Team Japan and I speak Japanese. So I was just practicing my Japanese with them. And one of them's like, excuse me, I have to actually get up and go right now. And he goes to go get his Hall of Fame ring because it was, oh God, I forget who got the Hall of Fame.
That might have been like Shuhei in 2011?
Yeah, in Shuhei. Yeah. Shuhei Nakamura. And I'm just sitting there like, I didn't know who he was at the time, but I was just getting smacked by these people. And I'm like, oh, I'm ruining their training by sitting here and like dragging the draft down. But yeah, it's like, Team Finland is there and team like you said, Uruguay, and I see all the flags walking in. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I suck worse than all these people. And so it was eye-opening. It was really fun. So after that taste of Pro Tour, did you like just try to keep onto the train and just start doing more competitive events at like high levels like that?
Since then, I've only missed 2 Pro Tours.
Oh, damn.
Which is actually like one of the feats I'm most proud of in my Magic career. So, because like top 18 qualified me for like the very next Pro Tour. So like that was already on lock, right? And then I ended up hitting silver that year for some like Grand Prix finishes and like how I performed at that Pro Tour in Washington. So like qualified for yet another Pro Tour. And so the train just kept rolling. And
That's awesome.
think like when I think back on it, it's like kind of like incredible how many lucky breaks I've caught in terms of like hitting the exact amount of points to like reach gold level where it qualifies me for all the Pro Tours the next season. And also just like getting on teams with good players much earlier than like maybe I should have in terms of my own level. And yeah, it really, like something I notice here is like the way you talk about things where it's like, you see these like good players and your reaction is like, oh, I'm so bad, I could never beat them. And my reaction was, oh, I'm really bad, I hope they can make me better. Or like that like, I think what I really found interesting about Magic is like how it's just challenging and that like, unlike, whatever I was doing with schoolwork and such was like not super challenging at that time, but like Magic really was. Like it felt like no matter how much I learned, there was just so much more to learn. And I had this like my mental image of like what a good Magic player was would always be just a step above where I was. So like no matter how far I climbed, I would still not be a good player. It took me like a while before I would ever describe myself as good on Magic. Like after multiple Grand Prix wins, I still would say that I was not good at Magic because of like that was my motivation, right?
No, that's Kai Buddha has said the same thing many times. He's like, look, dude, surround yourself with better players, be the worst person in the room, and then you will learn how to play. And I mean, that's worked for me. I talk poorly of myself a lot in terms of like, oh, I'm just a casual scrub. I'm very good at Magic.
You're probably way better than like what this image is.
Yeah, like I'm like better than like 80% of the Magic players, but the other 20% are on the Pro Tour, right? Like, but the thing is, it's more like I learned that my motivating factor in playing Magic was not necessarily wanting to be better and wanting to win all the time, as much as I just really enjoyed hanging out with Magic players and playing Magic for fun and relaxing. That's why when I like discovered Commander shortly afterwards, I was like, oh, this is the Magic I want to do.
Yes, exactly. It's like the exact perfect time.
Yeah, it's like, look, it's this more relaxed I mean, I love watching pro play, and I love being involved in that sense of like, playing your decks later after you guys do a pro tour. I go and build the decks in Arena or in Magic Online, and I try them out and I have fun. And like, I love playing limited and drafting and stuff like that. But what I'm just like, when my motivating factor is more like, I want to hang out with people and I want to just relax. And I want to enjoy myself. So it's like, because the amount, because I have ADHD. And so early on before I was able to compensate for these weaknesses, trying to focus on 8 hours of Magic in a row is very, very difficult. It's very mentally draining if you're a person who doesn't have the focus and the capacity to like hit that line straight on. You've been through now, like we said at the top, you've been through 4 top 8s now, which is like 3 days of play at highest possible level of these weekends, which are incredibly draining. How do you not like burn out by Sunday?
I do. I think a lot of it is though that I'm like, especially like when I come back from these events, like I am useless for a few days, and or like a week straight usually.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think a lot of it, like in the time, is that I'm just like riding on this like emotional high, and that just like gets me through. In terms of like just like taking care of like my own brain, I tend to pay a lot of attention to what I like, what I eat. So I just like start with a foundation of solid breakfast, and then I eat nothing but fruit and nuts and plenty of water throughout the day until dinner. And so I try to like not, because especially like if you like go and have a big lunch, what can easily happen is that like you play worse after lunch. And if I like am delayed with my breakfast and eat it like between, like I've had that habit too, where I've like been on like very little sleep, and then I go into a draft and I'm super focused for the draft, because like if you're sleep deprived, you can't really focus on anything else but that one thing. So it can sometimes improve your focus, but in short bursts. And so like had a draft that went really well, beat Jim Davis in the first round, and then I finally had some breakfast bagels, and then I played against Nathan and completely like my level dropped like significantly. And just awareness of like how that affects me is like definitely pretty big. And also all of these top 8s are like, at least in 3 out of 4 of them, I think it's I have made a punt that has caused me to be out of the tournament, right? And so not that it's like that's a unique thing for the top 8s, because I punt all the time, but at least like when you're in that state, it's like someone else, you're playing on someone who's like cutthroat enough to like not let you get away with like making a punt, and who will actually like beat you as a result. So that it does affect me for sure. But also I just like being around these people, and like I love being the center of attention too, which might be apparent from the way I behave myself. So that just like gives me a lot of energy, where like I can just use that for powering through like both the playing and then like the partying afterwards, and like the big dinners and everything. Like it's like, it's awesome. A lot.
Yeah, and I don't know, I love that Magic Cons and Pro Tours are now one and the same, so that we can start commingling and really just like, because I love watching pro tours and then going back and hanging out in the scrub tiers over on the other side of the room. But it's just like the energy in there is so nice. Everybody's so happy to be there. Everybody's excited to play Magic and talk about Magic and be with their group, and just like, people who you can just talk about cards and people understand you and you don't need to explain anything.
Yeah.
There's no friction. And even like, when you're meeting people from other countries or whatever, we've still got a medium with which we can communicate, and it's awesome. Like when I think back to like that 2011 Worlds, and I'm sitting there at my first ever draft. Like I had never drafted before. Worlds is not the place to learn how to draft, but I sat there and I'm like, going through this Innistrad pack and just picking cards that I thought looked cool. And the dude next to me, who's from Team Japan, turns and looks at me and holds up like a card and he points to it and goes like that, and I'm like, oh, and I could already tell he was saying, hey, why the hell did you pass this, doofus? And I was like, I didn't know, man. I'm just picking cards that look pretty. What do you want me to do? I learned a lot since then.
Yeah, that's funny. I can definitely see what you mean with like, being a bit out of your waters, like in that draft.
At the end of that day, Reed Duke, who was a Mox champion that year, taught me how to build a seal deck. And that's why I was like, okay, man, somebody needs to do this. It was awesome. But yeah, so how do you stay like I was just looking on the wiki and it's like now it's been 10 years since that first World that you did, so you've been basically playing pro Magic for a decade.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. And like to stay motivated through all of these like just ups and downs and everything is pretty challenging to do, except like if you really love Magic, obviously you're going to do this. But what keeps you coming back?
That I don't play perfectly yet. Like, I think that's a pretty big deal. Like it's just this game is very difficult, and what has been motivating for me is that it's just like this like hunt for like optimization. Like it's also been obviously very rewarding to be with a team like Team Handshake that I'm on right now, where we kind of like take testing so seriously that it's almost like a job. Like in terms of how we behave ourselves, right? We have like, scheduled meetings, and we try and like assign roles and like, really try and like teamwork together to like figure out what is the best, and like seeing that like work so often, and how, basically like in like since we started working together, like we've had an average of like 2 players in the top 8 of every Pro Tour. And
yeah, I know, it's insane.
Out of like 16 people, like 12 to 16 people. And so that like seeing that level of success is just very rewarding. Of course, it makes it even more rewarding when I'm one of those people in the top 8. But just like the whole process is like very like it's so easy for me to focus on it, and I see that there's like because there's like so many questions to be answered, and I'm just like curious and hungry for that knowledge and the search for it.
Can I want to talk about Handshake a little bit more, which is like one of the big power teams that's really shown up after lockdown, I guess, where you guys have just a collection of some of the best players in the world just hanging out and doing this. And but you guys are so spread out all over the globe. I know like Anthony's in Australia, for instance, and you're in Denmark, Javier's in Spain. Paulo was on the team and he was in Brazil when he was still doing this sort of thing. How do you manage to do that with like these kind of disparate time zones and not being in the same place? Because like it's different to test Magic online or like in a chat room than it is when you're sitting with your friends or whatever.
Yeah. We try and meet up a week before the Pro Tour. That's a big deal to making this work, because otherwise it's like really like we also try and like balance our team a bit with having people in different time zones. Anthony, for instance, he just changes his like whenever we close to a Pro Tour, he just changes his sleep schedule to fit European or American sleep schedule.
I mean, you have to.
And then we have people like me and Stefan who might have American like sleep schedules already, even though we live in Europe. So that changes a little bit. But we just like try and see when people are online, and like we just have a very active Discord that like, you could easily end up reading 1,000 messages every day in that Discord. When you wake up and it's like, okay, and then like now
what do you guys talk about? Like, I don't need specifics, but I'm just curious, like what sorts of things do you cover in there? Like, how does it, like, I mean, obviously you're talking about limited and constructed, or like, maybe we can talk about the last Pro Tour, like Pioneer. It was Pioneer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Pioneer. So do you guys like have groups of people who focus on testing for this format versus limited, or constructed or things like that, or how do you share
A
information like that?
little bit. We have like some people who are like better at like limited, so like they will do more drafts than the rest of us, and then we'll do more constructed. But it's like we all do everything too, because like you can't just like get a handful of notes and then learn from that. But what we try and do is like have people who are like, you know, have people play with different decks, and like have people who are good at playing with a certain deck be like, okay, so that's our go-to person. If you want to test against red black, we just like, you know, get Javier, and then he'll like crush us, and then we can see, okay, our matchup against red cross was not as good as we thought it was. And a lot of it is like so then we have like these different deck channels that we're like trying to like tune decks, and we come with like suggestions for cards or like ways to sideboard and matchups that we like then discuss the like merits of. And then we have a channel for like reporting results of testing, where it's not just like, oh, I went like 7-3 against Rakdos, matchup is favored. It's more like, we might have the result, we might not, but it's more like, okay, so I played like 10 games against Rakdos. It felt like, you know, whenever I had these cards, it was really good, but then the Rakdos players, like whenever they had these answers, it was actually kind of bad for me, and it made sense that like we should probably board in a way where we are more proactive than we thought we were supposed to be. Stuff like that. And obviously that's very like vague and like non-specific. But what we often tend to like, so for instance, last Pro Tour, we were working on the heroic deck versus Phoenix, and there was like different sets of matches played, where at first the heroic deck was winning. Then Phoenix started winning once the Phoenix player realized that they're not supposed to be the control deck in the matchup, but they're actually supposed to like pressure you. And then once we figured that out, we realized, oh, from the heroic side, we should not have like Rest in Peace, which is like a classic good card against Phoenix, and we should not have these like anti-control tools like Showdown of the Skulls. We should just also sideboard minimally and have removal spells so that we can make sure to not die to Electrotrader, and that's the only thing that matters. And so we kind of like go through these loops of like discovering a matchup as like both like the heroic players get better playing the heroic deck, and the Phoenix players get better playing Phoenix. Yeah. And then we might end up having a split team where some people play heroic and some play Phoenix, like we did last time, and that's totally fine because we've both been practicing and getting really good with our specific deck.
Yeah, because I was actually going to ask you about that, because heroic seemed like such an out of place deck when I looked at kind of like the way the standings worked out. It felt like almost like a Maverick deck that came out of nowhere. And I thought, like, I love playing Boros Heroic, so I thought it was really fun and it was a really cool deck. But I was very curious, like, when you sit down and the first time you see somebody playing that Vampires deck, did you see it coming? Did you guys know that that existed? Or
so Sorin is a card we've like been aware of for a while. Like, and whenever
I had totally forgotten that it existed entirely.
Whenever they print a new big vampire, we're always like, oh, can we build a Sorin deck maybe? But yeah, we forgot it existed this time around. We just like finally we've like had too many like burnt hands, and we did not see Vein Ripper and was like, oh, that's a combo with Sorin. So that did blindside us. But that's, you know, yeah, that's okay. Like, we'll just have to like improvise a bit when we play against the vampire players. And luckily, I didn't meet any in the Swiss rounds.
Yeah, because like, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that I just am always curious about from high tier Magic players is like, if you run into a rogue deck, like you've spent so much time testing matchups and testing metagame and testing kind of understanding this flow, and somebody comes up out of nowhere with a deck you've never seen before. What is that process like when you're playing them to try to, like, you don't have the time to sit and lose a bunch to figure it out. How do you adjust on the fly like that? Is it from knowing your own deck inside and out?
Yes, I think definitely there's a lot of like value in like knowing your own deck. You also have a bit of like an idea of how it responds to different things. A lot of times you just like, you are also just gonna have to like wing it. And maybe you try and like hedge a little bit where like you don't commit fully to a plan. You remove, okay, when I sideboard, like, okay, bring in like 2 copies of this and 3 copies of that, and then remove one of this, one of this, one of this. Like, you know, sometimes we just don't know, and that's okay. And like, you kind of have to just rely on the fact that like maybe, you know, the reason that we don't know about this deck is that not many people are playing it, and the reason not many people are playing it is because it's bad. And so that's like, I mean, obviously someone is doing well the Pro Tour, it can't be like terrible, but maybe like. But maybe sometimes like there's a reason that like people keep playing the same decks is that they also get iterated and like are generally like some of the better decks. So more often than not, but not always, people playing like rogue decks they are easier to beat because the dex power level is lower.
Mm.
But not always. Sometimes you get blindsided, and like you have, like the like standard big like 10K at the in Chicago that was won by a 68 card deck that wasn't playing 69 cards because then people wouldn't take it seriously. Like
I can't believe somebody picked Slogurk out of didn't even put it in Commander, but put it in Standard and won with that. That's almost offensive to me.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's just a bunch of cool things going on in
That
Standard
deck's
right
so
now.
cool.
It's
I think Standard is so much
place.
fun. I want to ask you about that, but I'll wait till after the Pro Tour to ask you. But yeah, no, Standard looks awesome. It looks super fun right now, which is nice. It's a nice change of pace because Standard has sucked for so long, and it's nice to not see Shield Red decks all the time. I hate that card. But yeah, what I forgot to mention is that last year you were Player of the Year.
Yes, I mean, as a result of like top 8ing 3 tournaments in a row at that point,
Like, that's insanely high level tier. I mean, congratulations, dude. Like,
thank you.
That's amazing achievement. And weren't you very close to making it this year too?
No, I mean, this year's still going, right? So people are joking that like, oh, I'll be back-to-back Player of the Year because I just like got second place right after being the Player of the Year. I will say probably not. I mean, realistically, I could still never top 8 a Pro Tour again. That could easily happen. And I'm aware of that. That's just how variance works. Like, I think I got fortunate in that, like, so I've had a career that has amounted to 5 Pro Tour top 8s. I also had one like during COVID. In an online Pro Tour, but like which is already something I'm very proud of. Like, and like, I could definitely see, it's obviously like a bit of fortune, but also like a lot of like the amount of like work I put into this game. And it just so happened that those like 4 of those top 8s just happened like next to each other. And that is very fortunate, right? That is like super lucky. And it might have been that like some of these top 8s are like. So the way I see them is like you imagine an entire like span of a pro career. And there's like some top 8s like jotted along the line, and they're going to be a little bit denser at the end because you get better. And so what I see is like right now I'm at some point in my line, and I just like at this point, like as a point in time where I've just sucked like Pro Tour top 8s close to where I am in time from both the past and the future. Like, so they just end up clustering together. And so in my mind, I feel like I've taken my Pro Tour top 8s from like 5 years from now and just had that like in Chicago. Front loaded, yeah, exactly. And so I don't expect necessarily that I will top 8 again. Maybe I will. Maybe my career was just 6th Pro Tour top 8 career. I don't know, but
that would be like a Hall of Fame career right there.
Well, yeah. So the thing is that it already is a Hall of Fame career, like 5 top 8s, and it's just like condensed into 2 years, which is absurd. But
it's absurd. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, but also amazing. Like, that's an achievement that we haven't seen since friggin' Finkel or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Incidentally, it's always wild to me when John Finkel decides to come back to play Magic and has another Hall of Fame career. Just rolls. He's got like 3 of them
LSU
just
did that too.
now.
Yeah, just having multiple separate Hall of Fame careers.
Yeah, dude, that guy's unreal. But God, dude, what was that like? Getting Player of the Year, beating Reed Duke. Man.
Very exciting. Also, again, a stroke of luck in that.
Like,
Player of the Year hadn't existed for 5 years, and then they announce it the year that I have my good year. Like, that's, so there's definitely a lot of these, like, just outside of like in-game luck, but just like coincidences of luck happening around this that I'm obviously like very appreciative of. And so,
look, man, sometimes your top decks run hot, right?
Sometimes you just keep running hot. And I honestly also think that like, there is something to this like idea of momentum, and I think my mental game has been the best it's ever been this past year because like when I reached that first Pro Tour top 8, like live Pro Tour top 8 in like Magic the Machines in Minneapolis. Wait, was it Minneapolis? Yeah, it was.
Yes, because one was in.
So I was just like very like at that time, like I lost the quarters to Autumn Bachet, who's like a good friend of mine, and like I just like felt amazing after like finally having achieved what I wanted to achieve back in 2011 when I first saw the Pro Tour Paris thing. Right, I got to play on stage in the quarterfinals in like a big game. And it was like amazing. A full like I think we played 2 hours of full match.
You did,
and it was awesome. And I got back, and people were like, "Oh, congrats and commiserations!" And what do you mean commiserations? Like, I'm so happy. Shut your mouth.
I mean, dude, I would be jumping up. Look, when I saw you when I got to meet you in Chicago, you had just like literally lost the finals of the Pro Tour and you were ecstatic.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, you were like so happy and just so jovial. Most people at that scene would definitely have a little bit of just like remorse or disappointment. I didn't see any of it on your face. You were just so happy to be there. I was like, this is awesome. It's like, I love that.
Yeah, I think actually we met before the finals, so which might have affected my mood. Because I had a long break between my semi-finals.
Okay.
So to be fair, I was like probably but still like even after the finals, like it was like you would definitely see me in like still in an electric mood over the achievement. And I think like what then happened is that like then the next Pro Tour in Barcelona, it was like, okay, I have a Pro Tour tribate now. I have qualifications for the rest of the year and Worlds, and so I'm good. I don't need to perform at this Pro Tour, and it's in Barcelona. So this is my vacation PT. I can just relax and take it easy, and it doesn't matter if it's updated again, I guess. So we did put in a lot of work for that, right? I just like generally enjoyed the process, but I wasn't setting out with any goals. My goal was to like miss day 2 and go to the beach.
Whoops,
and then for Worlds, it was a very similar. Like, at least for Worlds, I was a bit more engaged. But I thought, okay, 2 in a row. So like, now I have this like, bad tournament coming, and that's okay. I'll let someone else on the team survey this one. And then the same thing happened again in Chicago, where it's just like, okay, great, player of the year. Like now, maybe I can. And so I mean, at this point, I still expect that I'm going to miss day 2 of the next Pro Tour. That's what I'm going to continue to expect.
But the next one is in Amsterdam. That's like walking distance from you, man.
The next Pro Tour is like in Seattle.
Seattle, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have one that's not a Magic Con.
Con is in Amsterdam.
But then we have Amsterdam, which is basically walking distance if you're like a Titan.
I'm hoping to make it there this year. I really want to come and see Europe and actually be able to go hang out there. That's going to be really fun. But yeah, man, like, I don't know. This just seems like an awesome role. Like if I were you, I would just be like luxuriating it, just like whatever. And now everything after this is like a free roll, right? So you might as well.
Yeah. And like I also, like I'm finishing up my studies here like in a couple months, and then I'm going to be like full-time card games is my plan.
Are you in university right now?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm doing my bachelor degree, which has been on delay because of playing Magic at the same time as doing uni. At this,
what are you doing your degree in?
In linguistics.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
Oh, we should sit and we should.
Yeah, I realized that like we had that in common too. But
that's so cool.
Maybe that's after the podcast, or like a separate new podcast about language.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to sit and talk to you about linguistics. I'm a language and the history of language and the evolution of language is one of my like pet hobbies. So I love talking about that all day long. But that doesn't make for good Magic content.
No, definitely not.
But yeah,
very, very specific audience right there. That overlaps in both.
And we're like pretty much both of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So do you find yourself more of a limited player or a constructed player?
That's a good question, because when I started out playing on the Pro Tour, I was very much more of a constructed player than a limited player. I think I went 1-5 in my first like limited portion at the Pro Tour. But then since then, like somehow I think I've gotten like a lot better at limited. And I think the big thing is that I've just been with players who are very good at limited, and I've been good at putting aside my ego and listening to them and doing what they tell me. Especially whenever so something I've noticed about my drafting is that every single set, there is some archetype that I overvalue, and some cards because I overvalue certain cards, and they end up as like clunky bad decks. And so, like for the last format in Murders of Karlov Manor, it was red green. And I kept doing draft, and I was like, I just ended up red green. I don't know what to do, and I'm not forcing it. But I was just overvaluing some of the like disguised creatures that were like maybe more clunky than I did. Than like. I read them as good value cards, and maybe they just were like worse. And so it makes sense that I would get that like 7th pick. I'm like, oh my god, red green is open, and it was just that people valued the card like correctly, which is that it should go like 8th, 9th pick, and like I shouldn't react to it. So
look, unless you're opening Mole God, I'm not sure you should be playing red green in MKM. But
so it was. And so I think actually red green's like a fine archetype. You could like in general, like green aggressive decks were actually like pretty well situated at the end of that format. But that doesn't change from the fact that I overvalued it, and being aware that I have this flaw makes it so much easier to get better, because I just like need to identify what is my overvalued deck, and then I can just drop that down mentally. Like you drop the numbers and my evaluation down, and so I'm aware that I have this bias, and I can then work towards like work against it.
Yeah, it took me a long time to understand that about myself as well. As like I've used to always find myself, I'm like, why do I always end up in green ramp decks? And then I started looking at it and I was like, oh, what if I actually started taking the cards that are good, not the cards that I like?
Mm-hmm.
And learning that changed the way I play Magic entirely. And then I started actually winning. And I was like, oh, what a concept.
Yeah, exactly.
The cards that win, not the cards that are fun. But
and also like you will also have fun with the other approach. It's just like a different type of fun, right? And it's
right.
Yeah, to me it's good to like be able to like change a little bit between them. Like right now we're in the brewing process of the new standard format, and I love that part. I love building new decks. I'm pretty bad at it, but so like none of them are good. But like but I think it's important for me to like have that be part of my process to like keep me engaged. And then at some point I'll be like, okay, yeah, now I'm done with doing the things I'm doing for me. Like, let's see what is actually like good. What can I, help my teammates with?
Yeah, like I find that when I'm playing like a new set, because my focus tends to be on Commander so much, like I love playing limited because then I can actually experience the cards of the set in totality, really understand what they do, and then apply them to other formats that I do. And that helps. Like I found that like a lot of Commander players tend to be very like focused and single-minded on our one format, and I'm like, if you diversify and actually learn to play sealed or something, you will experience there are way cooler cards than just like the four that WotC prints for us to play.
Yeah, it was like building I only have one Commander deck, but like that was I bought the Cathril Precon, which is like cares about keywords in the graveyard. Then like it gets all the keywords you have in your graveyard and gets a counter for each of those keywords.
Yeah.
It also technically can spread the keywords, but what I realized is like, it's just much better to have everything on the same creature. That is huge. And so I went through my collection and just trying to figure out like, which like keyword creatures can I play. And I realized, oh wait, hold on. So the goal is to get like indestructible and hexproof and double strike on this thing, plus a bunch of other things. They can't interact with it, and eventually it just like kills each player. So I just like see, okay, so that's my goal now. Instead of doing this like, weird spreading out keywords, I'm just focused on like milling myself and trying to see if I can find keywords. But my restriction is that I can only build this from cards I own. And so there's just like a very fun process to like try and figure out. And it's like, oh, I have this like weird hexproof from Planeswalkers lifelink flying card from Kaldheim, which counts as hexproof for
it sure does.
And so
like yesterday, Anthony brought up a thing that I'd never heard of or thought of before. That was one of the coolest things I've ever considered, which is, if you're at a pro tour and you play your limited deck and you've got all those cards that you've done, and maybe you have a deck that you got a lot of memories from your pro tour, like, oh yeah, I went 3-0 with this limited deck. You could turn that into a Commander deck because there's so many legends in every set now, and then you can just keep it and play with it, and all your cards can be pro tour stamped, and it's super sweet like that. Like, I think it was Kibler who showed me like he's got decks where the restriction is he can only play a card if he opened it in a pro tour. Nice. And I'm like, that is a hell of a restriction. That's also quite a flex to be able to sit there and pull up.
Yeah, if you save all the draft decks, that's cool. I do save my Frio draft decks. That's something I saw Yusa do, Martin Yusa. That like he would just have them as like, trophies or like memories. And it's been really nice to like, whip them out once in a while and look at them. And then like sometimes, I get to like maybe like play with them, and it's like they also like work as fine introductory products. Like I have
exactly
at the Lord of the Rings Pro Tour, I went 6-0 Unlimited, which is perfect because that's 2 Frio decks of a like a set that is very like relatable for a lot of players who like don't know Magic but might know Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, man, and also I just loved that limited format. It was so much fun. Yeah, man. I don't know. I'm just like, it's so neat to sit there and think, like, what was that like getting the Player of the Year, though? Like, getting the award and going through the ceremony and all that. Was that cool?
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of hard to describe because it's like just, you already like really like ecstatic and happy for like the results themselves. And then there's also just this like extra thing. So but I think like one of the big things was like when I then went and like saw the list of like other Player of the Years. Previous Player of the Year players, and it's like there's obviously some names on that list, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be that person. But there's also names where I'm like, wow, I'm in this group. Like it
Yeah.
is like exactly like John Finkel, Kai Bude,
Right.
and like these people where like Shuhei as well,
Yeah.
where it's just like in 10 years. I'm going to be one of the names on that list, right? And people are going to be like, oh, right, Simon Nielsen. Oh, that's cool. There's like, one of the greats, maybe, like people will say that. I mean,
You're on the way.
Like, it's weird for me to say right now because I certainly don't feel like one of the greats.
Right.
But also, like, I don't know. I mean, I also just like top 8 a lot. So like maybe I am.
I mean, look, there are worse hobbies to have than top 8ing every Pro Tour you play.
Yeah, for sure. It's like very lucrative, for sure. So yeah, it's like hard to say. I mean, I definitely like feel like, really like just like honored that it happened and that we got to do like a little bit of a like trophy ceremony and that I have just like the like
That's
physical
awesome.
plaque of like,
Is that
you are
cool?
the player of the year. And it's been very nice to be able to tell people because like a lot of times it's like, oh, I top 8 this Pro Tour and like people don't know what that means. And then you tell them how much you won and they're like, oh, okay. But like being able to say like, I was the player who won the most in 2023 and it's like, that's impressive, right?
Player of the Year is a title that people understand. Yes. It's like world champion, right? Like people know what a world champion is. It doesn't matter if you know what the thing is. It just like somebody was the best of the best. That's still pretty sick, man. I actually want to circle back a second because you said something very early on that I was just like curious about. You said, "Oh, you play very theatrically because you have a theater background."
Oh yeah.
Can you? What do you mean by that? Like,
so no, it's like actually there was a point in my life, like right around that time when I started high school. I was very into like doing amateur theater and might want to like pursue that as a career. I was like doing, drama classes at high school and so on, right? I was into musicals. I can't sing though, so that's an issue. But also I had magic, and both of those things are weekend activities. If you want to indulge in them a lot. So I had to pick like which one, and I ended up like going with magic as like my I had a friend who was also in a similar spot who chose like to do like theater, and he's like like starring in musicals like all over, cool. Which is like, so it's very cool to see that like our paths have like led somewhere. And then very recently I went back like to my roots and like started doing more LARPing, which is like one way to like be theatrical. I mean,
it sure is.
I don't like the like gamified part of Dungeons and Dragons because when I game I want to optimize, and that's I just want to like do a silly voice. And then I started doing improv classes too, which has been like great for me as well.
My god.
But so there's like definitely been like this part of me that like likes to perform, which
you should be hanging out with Maria more.
Yes, yeah, no, I talked to Maria about this. Yeah, no, I mean she's great. So it's definitely like a perfect overlap, and I think sometimes I try and like do that a little bit when I play Magic as well, but not always. So yeah, we'll see. I mean,
I'm going to call my buddies at Loading Ready Run and see if we can get you on a pre-release, because I think you would love to go sit and do all their improv skits and everything with them.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, that would be very cool.
That'd be amazing. They need more Euros on there, anyways. Wow, that's a hell of a career, though. That's a really like accomplished. I mean, even just 2 years worth of time is really amazing, and I don't know. I just love watching you play, and I'm really happy that we were able to have a chat today. It's really cool. God, is there anything else I want to ask you? Because like, there's so much I had in mind, and then it's lost thinking about theater and language. But yeah, you know what? I think that's a good place for us to kind of call it here. Thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. This is really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it too. I don't know if I could like do an end note with like looping back to the thing you said at the beginning with like so many people who are like feeling like it seems like people who like don't feel the joy about the game anymore. And yeah, I don't like know like what the message I can bring like that specifically relates to that, but
yeah, I
think there's something about question.
Like how do you keep yourself enjoying this?
Yeah, I think like the part is definitely like to focus on the people. Like is like the fact that I have these pro teams is like a big part of it, and like focus on the process. And like people often ask me like, do you like this format? And I'm like, question mark? Like I don't understand the question. Like I play the format because that's my what I do, and like it doesn't matter like if I enjoy it because it's Magic and the process of Magic is fun. And so it doesn't matter that much what it actually looks like. And so figuring out what you can like focus on that like makes you enjoy the game, whether it's like, the deck building. And then you don't need to be like, focused on that, like all these like, people who don't like that people play all the same decks. That's an advantage for you. You can, then you know what to beat, right? And it's like a challenge. And there's these, or you could like, be focused on the playing Commander with your friends, and like it's more about the like getting together part of it, or that it's the traveling to like an RPTQ with your like friends in a car and you do that road trip. Like that could be the fun part. And like it doesn't actually matter if any of you win the tournament, because that's not why you went there in the first place.
Yeah. Yes. That is, God, that's such a good message. And people always just get so invested in the wins and losses, and they forget the enjoyment of this. Like I used to see grinders all the time who would just be like in airports all the time, going GP to GP to GP, selling their card, going home to sleep. And I'm like, I get what you're doing and why, but you're missing out on so much of just what makes this fun and turning it into drudgery, right? Like this should not be a chore. You shouldn't feel like forced into playing Magic like this. I feel like if you're doing that, your mindset is maybe
it's also just impact like how you play as well. Like, and I think like another important thing is just like realizing that the losses are a big part of like you need to get good at losing if you want to get good at Magic.
Seriously.
And so it's like they have to be like cherished somehow. Like that, a lot of your losses, like they can definitely be like part of the experience, right? And like maybe, especially if you have like one of these heartfelt losses, you're so close, and then you messed up, or like something went wrong, and like that sort of like anger and frustration you feel is like what makes when it happens and when it works. That's what that like cliff drop is what makes the highs like good, right? Like, we need that. That's why this game is good. Like Mana Screw is like an important mechanic for the game to be as good as it is. In my like, I'm subscribed to that. As long as it doesn't happen all the time and you have ways to
I mean, look, none of us wants to have what LSV did at that one Pro Tour where he had like 2 lands and got nothing else the whole time.
Yeah, had the mull to 4 in the the finals of a Pro Tour, and then they changed the mulligan rule. It's definitely like an awkward like timing for it to happen at that point. But in the grand scheme of things, that was just one match out of his like many matches, and you can live with having like one of those like Mana Screws happen. I mean, now I said that I'll probably like, miss my next top 8 because I Mana Screw 2 games in a row in my winning in. But
I mean, I guess that's the one thing about Commander is like, look, there's 4 of us. You're only going to win 25% of the time. That means you're losing 3 out of every 4 games of Commander you're playing just because of statistics, right? Like, and I teach my son this because he's 10 and he's a really sore loser a lot. I'm like, look, dude, I am one of the best Commander players in the world, and I lose like 80% of the games I play just because of the numbers. And yet it's still the thing that I love doing because the loss isn't the point. Like, yeah, if I win, great. But like, if I lose, I still got 2 hours or something to hang out with people and play decks and watch these cool interactions happen. It's not, it just depends on like, are you investing all of your energy into the result or into the path that gets you there? Right. And I mean, look, if you're playing a Pro Tour, that's different. I can see like if you get cut off right before money, or if you get like, right before top 8 time. Yeah. Okay. That sucks. Right. Like I understand that sucks. I'm not saying that doesn't, but in the grand scheme of playing Magic, like you're going to lose some. You're going to lose more often than you win. And you might as well just like enjoy the time you're doing while you're here. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That would be exactly my words on the subject.
Anyways, with that, my friend, if people wanted to find you or talk to you about anything, where could they go?
So on Twitter, I'm horrible at doing the what's it called, the marketing thing. So I have like different names everywhere. But on Twitter, I am at Mr. Checklist Card. That is MR Checklist Card. And which that's an old intro with Rich Hagon, and there's no reason that's still my name, but it is. And then I technically have a Twitch channel and a YouTube channel. I'm just Simon Nielsen on YouTube. That's like, but I don't post very often there. I don't stream very often. So I think Twitter is like the main way you can get to me.
I would have said support, promote your coaching, but you've stopped that till you can finish your degree.
Oh, true. Yeah, no, yeah, that's true. Actually, I do coaching. If you have a little bit of patience until June, I will pick that up again. So that's like metafighter.gg/ @Simon Nielsen with a dash.
Yeah,
That's probably easier to like just find a link somewhere,
or just go to your
Google
Twitter
it.
feed and they'll see the link right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, focus on your studies, finish your degree, man. Like, at least have that in your hand so that you can go back to playing Magic for real and not worry about
not feel bad about it. Yeah,
right, exactly. You've already put in this much time and money into it, you might as well see it to the end. But yeah, then with that, my friends, you can find me at Gearboard Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at YouTube every Tuesday, thanks to my editor Dan. You can also see me on Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic. We just did a 3-part episode, 7 hours, talking about the original Legend set, which is insane, and I love it. But we like talking about Magic cards. And you can also hear me on the Chronicles of Dragonlance once a month, where I sit and talk about Dragonlance games. And please support me on my Patreon, patreon.com/ShivanB, so I can buy a new chair and stop falling in these goddamn videos that I'm doing. But with that, my friends, it's not Magic without the Gathering, and we'll see you next time.